it's great. As far as studies regarding composting goes, um, I'm sure all this that you have is backed up by a lot of study and research that is being done.
Well, I mean, field research is limited as well. Um, I think we're really the only, entity in North America. Granted, there's been a lot of companies and composters that have done their own field tests, so I'm not saying we're the only ones, but I think just consolidating our core competency as providing the research in the piles to help the designer of a product better understand how it's performing in modern facilities. I think that's where I'm really feeling our value right now. You have a lot of big grants working on a lot of big stuff to address climate change and plastic, marine plastics and all those things. And they're seeing compostable as the option. But one of the things we're trying to create is a space so composters are included in the dialogue. What always concerns me is if you do this great design of this great program of this compostable, but you never integrated the composters that will receive it. I think that's a lot of why, we have some of the recycling issues today that developed over time. There was a big disconnect
There is a
between the
disconnect,
actual
right?
design of those products and the facilities that had to process them. So we're just trying to avoid that by
Yeah,
creating a space where we can come together. And I like to say it this way: composters are manufacturers, manufacturers are manufacturers. If
right.
we can have manufacturer to manufacturer relationships, we can get a lot further, a lot faster in
And it
designing
is a
things
product,
around the circular economy.
absolutely. And it is a product that you manufacture out of waste. So
Exactly.
it is a process of manufacturing.
Yeah, and it improves the environment. You're not just making a product, you're making a product that cleans
Absolutely.
up waterways and, filters out impurities in the soil and, all those neighborhood bioswales where they have the fence around, that's full of compost doing its job. So we're cleaning up the environment with the product we make. So it doesn't get better than that.
Absolutely. And that's a huge plus point, right? I mean,
Right.
for that matter. So how is industrial composting different from home composting? You know,
Great question.
somebody can have at this point. So,
Great question. So home composting A will be managed as well as the person that understands how to manage it. So, we take our browns and our greens, the carbon and nitrogens, and we have a nice mix, and we take our leaves and our grass and our food scrap. And just like at an industrial composter, you have to turn the pile. You can't just throw it in there and, think it's compost, a year later when you never turned it, right?
true.
So you have to manage your pile at home to make good compost. But what you don't have in a home composting system is you don't have a lot of the mechanical controls. You clearly don't have the volume. You're just doing your thing for your house. And again, we're all for home composting because then it doesn't leave your house at all and you're just making it for your own. That environmentally, that's the most important thing to do is home compost.
True.
But for a lot of people that don't have land or might live in a multifamily a residential complex, or they really don't have the time. They're getting the kids to school when school's meeting, non-COVID, and they're busy. Then having the curbside option is great. So industrial composting is different in that it has, you have to have a permit for it. So you have to have a lot of certain kinds of equipment. You have
Mhm.
to have certain environmental controls. You have to be able to do a lot of volume in peak season.
True.
So it takes a lot of labor. It can take a lot of labor. It can take a lot of technology to manage it through the high season.
Yeah.
And it has to be very controlled because understand industrial composter is manufacturing a product that they want people to buy every year.
Mm.
So just like a product that you would get used to, like a coffee, a certain brand of coffee. Oh, I like it this color. I like it this dark. I like it this kind. I like it with the little stand. I like the topsoil blend. That product has to be consistent year after year after year. So if there's not a lot of control or the blend changes a lot, they can't always create a consistent product. So on the flip side of what we do, if they get things that aren't compostable or don't meet the composter standard, that can really inhibit their ability to sell a consistent looking performing product. And that's really what we're trying to address is for many composters, industrial composters, the real opportunity to add profit to the bottom line is when they sell their product. So, so it's very controlled, very different, follows a very regimented system when it's industrial, probably has permit requirements on how they run every day. And the
Mhm.
technology is built for a lot of volume and you're going to get a lot higher temperatures. So
True.
that's one thing I would point out that gets asked a lot. Oh, can I put this compostable portion cup in my home composting? Only if you hit 170 degrees or 160, which a home composting pile with all the best
Yeah.
management will never
Right.
hit that temperature. So those are really not intended, unless they say
Right.
home compostable, they're really not intended for home composting piles.
Okay. And I'm sure you have a website, and do you have like a list of things that can?
Yes. So what with all our testing we've done at the various processes we've tested in, it's you can either go to composterapproved.com or compostmanufacturingalliance.com, but composter approved is shorter. And you just go to accepted products on
Mhm.
our page, on our homepage, and it'll drop down and give you a list for different cities with the map
Yeah.
of the cities and what they accept. And that map is growing. You know, we're getting more and more facilities calling because this is really kind of a, I guess you could say, very efficient system to connect everybody
Yes,
to what
exactly.
works.
Yes, because there is no other like it in the US, at least I know of.
Yep.
So I think this is a brilliant initiative for that matter.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that.
No, absolutely. And the issue of composting has it gets asked everywhere, even if you walk down the road to your neighbor's house or even with friends. People ask, okay, what can you compost or what you can't compost, and so things like that. So somebody, who can go to your website and get that kind of a list, it'll really help them do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, the next question I have is, packaging is a huge part of who we are and in this world, right? So, how do you, I mean, what kind of packaging is required? How do you evaluate different kinds of packaging that can be composted? Or do you have any standards and, any studies done in that regard?
Well, I think again, our prerequisites are really that they meet the lab standards to ensure they're safe materials and that they've already been vetted in a laboratory through a recognized ASTM or American Society of Testing Methods
Hmm.
program that we can check off they've met that requirement in the lab. So
Right.
after they meet that, we're really, we are really only interested in dine-in food service items. I think one of the things that we're not really ready for, and this is just my opinion and several of my partners, is really, if everybody makes everything compostable, then that's not necessarily the best thing either, at least right now. And what I mean by that is, if there's a category like, a candy bar wrapper or something on the shelf at the store, if only one company makes that compostable, but nobody else does, then
Yes.
you're going to get people are going to get confused and go, oh, well, are they all compostable now? So we would throw caution out there that to do programs that expand to grocery retail type of items or items that aren't food related, like we've had people that want to make compostable, packing peanuts or something that would replace a plastic alternative, that we appreciate the intention and we're all about zero waste. But at the end of the day, those really aren't practical inputs for a composter because they look like non-compostables and we just have a long way to go. So I would say if we can stick to food service and food related, we really need to get better at that right now and we can really focus in on that. Then I think once we solve some of the problems with mixed contamination coming in and all that, then I think we can move on to those other areas where at the end of the day, the thing I always like to remember to say is we take compostable packaging to get the food that will come with it. It's not that empty packaging is super valuable to a composter, but it is valuable if there's food in it that we're not going to landfill. So if everybody can kind of keep that mindset, I'm not saying we wouldn't look at other things down the road, but I do think everybody needs to be cognizant. Let's start with food and then slowly look at what we can pioneer down the road in some of the other categories.
And this has to be done across the board, like you said. I mean, you can't have some people doing it.
And that's why we did a national network. I mean, if you go to our website, you'll see on the accepted products page a map full of our facilities. We're all agreeing to accept these standards
Wow.
because we're the facilities that are the ones that are gonna, somebody's gonna make a compostable item, and if they've never talked to us, we're the facilities that have to deal with that. That's why we're hoping to talk ahead of time
True.
and test those things ahead of time. So all these people aren't taking their investments to create these compostables only to find out, oh, I thought I could sell it in this town and this town, and they don't want it. And it's like, why not? Well, the composter actually wants to test it too. So
Yeah.
we're really trying to help them avoid some blockages down the road by
Right.
utilizing our network.
Right. In fact, that was going to be my next question. I mean, what are the certain roadblocks that you are seeing right now, in what you're doing in establishing a system or even in the foreseeable future?
Roadblocks from what perspective? From
Uh, from the composting part of it.
I think not being part of the dialogue is a huge roadblock, or CMA wouldn't even exist. I do think there's this historical standard that once we design it, we met the lab standards, we're done. And again, we're business people too. We appreciate all the innovation and the intent to make excellent products that compost, and we're 100% behind that. But we want to engage people in the thoughtfulness to understand that if you invested in all that and composters aren't part of your ideas about the end of life, then you've only done half the work, and that might be like, oh no, I got more work to do. But by the same token, we want to be able to accept those things, so we're providing a way to do that. So I think if CMA didn't exist, I think you'd have a lot of composters that would say no to all of it. But we're actually able to give them a system that allows them to take it. And I think that's the way product manufacturers need to feel about it, is we're really creating a network to sell your products into,
Exactly.
assuming they compost okay.
Exactly.
And sometimes, they might have to do a couple iterations. A lot of stuff passes just fine, but there's some that might have to go back and be reformulated. And at the end of the day, that's really what we need, because composters can't accept stuff that doesn't break down. So I think this is really a new dialogue, and we're super excited to be a leader in it. But I think there's a lot more we can do together, and I think we can get there so much faster. I mean, I tell this story. I worked in Seattle with the big composter here. When cutlery first came out, I went to a big event, the mayor was there, and I brought the first compostable cutlery at any of the mayor's big meetings, and as they were stirring their coffee, they were pulling out stubs of nothing. And that's when, cutlery only stood up to 110 degrees, right?
Right.
So over about 7 years, you can throw that same spoon in a cup of hot chowder and it won't do that. So I know it's possible to improve products, to hit both the performance targets in the field and the consumer needs
Right.
and in the compost pile, but we need more of that. We need more of that engagement so we can make sure that there's a feedback loop to the people making products, so they understand you can't just leave it at a lab standard. You have to take it a step further, at least from our opinion,
Right.
to really make it a legitimate system.
Okay. So yeah, I believe that too. And so you are doing that. You are reaching out, or how are you? Uh, with
Well, I surprisingly, we get pretty steady incoming calls all the time. So we do a lot of leadership. I work on the U.S. Composting Council. It's a group called Target Organics. Our whole focus is to unlock capacity, uh, opportunities for more composting in the US. So we're looking at the barriers. So I'm, clearly in that leadership position. I hear from both composters and packaging companies. I've done a lot of speaking, a lot of webinars. but we really haven't done a lot of marketing, and we seem to have a very steady stream of people calling and asking for assistance. So we're
It,
hoping that in the new year that we have a little bit more budget now to expand more of our communications, which I think has been a bit weak. We just haven't had the bandwidth because we're still relatively new and kind of growing along
right.
with our ability to fund ourselves. But I think in the next year you're going to see a lot more of CMA doing a lot more communicating on this issue, and we're hoping to get your help with that because
I'm
there's not enough people talking about it.
I know, I know, and like you said, it has to get into people's mind. I mean,
Right.
on home bases or in homes, people are trying to do whatever they can, right? I mean, in composting, so it is there, but actual education is required. I feel.
There's so much education to be done. So
Right,
much.
right. So we talked about packaging. So what role does packaging play in composting? The kind of feedstock that you have, or in
Well,
that regard.
yeah, there are three things I would say. First of all, as I mentioned before, packaging, it can be the provider. For instance, when you look at a lot of cities start by doing just yard waste,
Mm-hmm.
as the first thing they contract out for is like leaves and grass and all the great stuff at the curb. And so once you do food waste, there's more controls required, more processing. But that food waste could be 30 or 40% of what we ship to the landfill. So there's a lot of it that we could be capturing and making compost out of. So a really good example of where packaging can help those programs is, they've done studies that say you don't get a lot of residential participation
Mm-hmm.
when you don't use a compostable bag,
Right.
because nobody wants to take a yucky container and, one or
Yeah.
two tries and it gets so dirty you don't. So the bag is just like a trash bag, only it's compostable, and they get a lot more participation. So that's one way where composters love it because they get more food, and there's a lot of bags that break down in the lab and in the pile. So there's plenty of opportunities to get good compostable bags that are CMA certified.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's one way. I would say the other thing that I'd love to start exploring is contamination reduction.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, if you look at what the number one contaminants are in composting piles, at least from my experience, film plastic is a big one. Why is that? Okay, if you think about it, you bring all this produce home and all this stuff, and the lettuce has a plastic cover on it, and you put your zucchini in a plastic bag, and now there's plastic over the zucchini,
Oh yes.
right? And all that's great because that plastic over the zucchini allows that another 14 day shelf life. Well, it's the bane of a composter's existence if it ends up in. So, are there ways to design things that could perform to do that also would compost well so they're not contaminants? And I would
Correct.
love to tell you, people always pull the sticker off the fruit and the but so could you use compostables as a contamination reduction strategy? Could you look at all those
Yeah.
categories that are actually contaminating compost and to convert them to compostable to clean up the piles? That would be another way packaging can play a role. And then I think finally, you know, packaging again plays a role when it brings in, food, or it helps keep, streams clean of non-compostables. And I use a really good example. There's a lot done with a restaurant chain, Nature Works, worked on a case study with Taco Time, local company here actually, but they have multiple stores where they do a one bin system, and it's all compostable, so they don't get cross contamination between recyclables and compostables. And it's great for their consumers because they just have one bin.
Oh, that's
So they don't have to think about sorting. So if we can create BMPs and systems together that allowed it just to be there's only one bin because it's all compostable and it all works, then
yes.
we can everybody can benefit from that. And as you well know in the work you do, sorting and
Yeah.
consumer education, we got to
It's
make it simple.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, a person should be able to understand, a consumer on a basic level should be able to understand, and that's where it starts.
Right.
So, And that's again, that leads to my next question is, what efforts are being done, on grassroots levels, to educate the consumer, or in counties and cities, to kind of establish an integrated system of composting, whether it's involving composting manufacturers, composting facilities, and so on. So.
Well, usually the way the mechanics work, so composting programs are hyper local. They're built in communities. They don't go anywhere. They stay in the community. That's why they're great sustainability models. But they're driven by policies and they're driven by cities and municipalities, to your point. So what I found very effective in my years working in the solid waste and composting systems is really working on collaborative programs where the cities, the haulers, the composters, the product sellers, the distribution arms are all talking together, because I always call it the beach ball. There's a red stripe and the green stripe and the blue stripe.
Mhm.
You have to have the 360-degree view of who makes it successful, and you have to take the time and the discipline to work through the issues together. So if you designed a program and you were just the composter, but you never included the hauling company and the sellers of the products, you might think you have the greatest program in the world, but it
Right.
falls apart because you didn't know all these other factors that would have made it a little bit easier to design it well. So I think that's what I would encourage, and that we're always encouraging. And we're actually hosting groups now that kind of talk about the stakeholder experience of building programs together. It might
Mhm.
take a little bit longer, but the programs will be solid. So I would say the way we help create opportunities to do more and do it well is to really treat this as a collaborative
Exactly.
program where if we're not talking, if you go to your hauler and you were to start a group, where you live, and bring all those entities together, it's amazing the kind of work you can do it. And I hate to say it, but in many, many cases, in my experience, those conversations aren't happening
I know.
across the US. They're happening with CMA and its partners, but they really need to happen with everybody.
Yeah. And I think because it takes a lot of effort, it's getting out of your comfort zone and doing something. And frankly speaking, I think right now we do need to get out of that comfort zone.
Well, thank you. And I think the other thing too, and I just speak for composters, composters investing in the infrastructure that we do enjoy now, granted we want a lot more. I mean, I'm always going to stand by the it can be a hard industry. It's very seasonal. There's a lot of pressures. There's more pressure to take more. They are businesses. They need to be profitable. They need to be able to grow their businesses. We have to be concerned about their business model. And
Yeah.
I think that they're more than happy to be part of the solution. But I do think it's these engagement models like CMA's created that really creates a place where we can solve problems together. And I'm thrilled at the number of leaders out there from all aspects, supply chain leaders, product developers, that really get this and really get excited about working together. So I have great hope, and we're already making progress in some areas I never thought we would. So
Oh,
really collaboration, collaboration, collaboration.
yeah.
That's
I
all I
think
can
that
say.
is the name of the game now. I mean, and I've been saying this in my podcasts too. I think because I do see all these companies coming together and collaborating for a common goal, and I
Yeah.
think that's what we need now. I mean, we are at a point where we have to collaborate. We have no choice there,
Yeah.
because you can't do this individually.
No.
It's a collaborative effort.
Yeah, I feel a very different system kind of syncing up, not just about CMA, we're just one piece, but I'm
Right.
feeling this cultural
It is.
shift in the way we kind of engage these
Yes.
kind of issues, especially environmentally, is people are a lot more informed. There's a lot more ability to inform people, but we gotta, to your point, we really not need to get the messaging clear, straight, understandable. And I do think there's a big disconnect between a
Absolutely.
lot of what's being done in the solid waste and product development field and the actual consumer that's out there really wanting to do the right thing and doesn't know what the right thing is.
Yes,
So,
you're right, because I have people asking me, even on local levels, what am I supposed to do about composting? Is there a place I could go to? So so that's why people who are listening to my podcast are giving me these feedbacks. That and I'm really glad that we could connect, and I'm so glad to host you here today.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and obviously I have plenty to say. So I appreciate having a voice on your podcast anytime. We're happy to.
No, we will have you come back, and we want to wish you all the best, and looking forward to all the milestones that you're going to cross. And any help I can be, I will definitely do my best.
Thank you, Deepa. We will count on that, and we just really love the work you're doing as well. So thank you for the
So
connection.
thank you so much. And yes, looking forward to another great hosting with you.
Okay, and you as well.
And so people can go to your website as well. And if they need any help or any kind of information. So thank you again for being here. And thank you for everybody who's listening. Um, you can get all the information at Cool Earth Connections. You could go to www.sustainablepackagingservices.com and get the information, or connect to us at connections um, at sustainable services packaging services.com. So that'll be awesome. And thank you again, Susan, and
Thank you, Deepa.
see you. uh,
Okay.
and please stay tuned for fantastic interviews that are coming up. Actually, I have a pretty good lineup coming up, so it'll be great.